I'd like to welcome you to this week's portrait painting video. My name is Yupari, and I'd like to guide you through the development of this painting in such a way that it is dedicated to those of you that consider yourselves beginners or experienced painters that are just seeking to learn something new. Alright, getting started here, I'm going to use just a pretty beat up, what is this? This is a size 10 filbert bristle brush, or at least I think it was a filbert. It might have been a flat, but it's kind of hard to tell what it is at this point. So I just dipped it into the mineral spirits. And I'm going to be starting off with just raw umber. So this is just raw umber. And I'm working on a regular cotton canvas this time. It's pretty much your everyday cotton canvas that you'll find in a large value pack. So nothing special about this. I'm going to try to use this surface because it's fairly inexpensive, and I think everyone kind of has access to this type of cotton canvas. And if you want to know exactly what materials I'll be using in this video, I'll have all that information typed up into the description box below. So getting started here, I want to first put a little pass of my raw umber. And here's our model for the week, Danae, and I'm going to keep an image of her to the top left corner of your screen. So now that the canvas is all nicely toned, I'm going to go in and with just the paint that's on the brush, just get an idea of where I want the head to be placed. Notice some of the bristles are actually falling off this brush, so you do not need anything fancy for this. So I've dipped into a little more of the mineral spirits. So let's get started. This is how we're getting started. Very simply, I'm just going to make a little mark here for where I want the top of the head to fit. And then I'm going to make a little mark here for maybe the bottom edge of the hair. And let's just liberate this brush. Liberate it. Get a feel for the surface that you're working on. Try to stand at least an arm's length away from your surface. And just try to get a simple shape. Just like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very simple. Very simplistic shape. And I'm going to be working in this way to emphasize the simplicity of the way that we can handle oil paint in this fashion. So this is kind of my rough perimeter for where I want the head to fit. Here's the corner of the hair, and then here's the little angle for the other side of the hair. Maybe the top of the head fits about here, and then we're going to let the hair trail off the end here. So I'm going to have a little negative space there. So I'm going to apply more paint now to the brush, and we're going to quickly get a little tone here for where the hair mass is going to be. Very simply, just dipped the brush into the raw umber. I didn't add any more mineral spirits to it, just what's already on the brush. And again, simple shape. 1, 2, 3. Very simple. So now we're just blocking in this mass of the hair. Try and work the entire picture in the beginning. Just get a feel for where everything is going to fit. So here's going to be the, let's say this is about, maybe about here, the bottom of the chin. And it doesn't have to be set in stone right now. We're just getting an idea of the simple shape. And it can be as simple as this. Just a little shape right there. Now you can kind of get an idea of where I want the head to fit. So let's put in the other little mass here of dark for the hair. Again, very, very simple. Just a very simplistic shape to get me going. Just to get an idea of where I want the head to be placed. So I'm going to say right about here, and the block in is going to be defined as just blocking in the entire structure of the head with a few simple straight lines and angles. So let's get into that. So here's an angle for the forehead, a little angle right there, just a straight line for the forehead right there. I don't know if it's exactly the right angle, but it's a start. little corner there for the side of the eye to the left of your screen, and nothing set in stone. I'm just getting a feel for where everything is going to fit. And then we're going to have maybe a little mark here for where I think the nose is going to be. Again, just getting a feel for everything. Now the axis of the eyes, let's do this little blob looking thing, just a simple rectangle. Just a simple rectangle like this to give me an idea of where I want the axis of the eyes to exist. Very simplistic. You saw how simple this shape was. Not a very complicated arrangement of shapes, as simplistic as I can make it. Here's another straight line for the corner of the chin, and we're going to work in such a way that the paint is going to handle very similarly to vine charcoal, to emphasize the idea that in the beginning we're really thinking about drawing pretty much just a blob there for where I think the nose is going to fit. And with a little more pressure here, I can actually take off some of the paint. So I'm subtracting a little bit to create this little shape here. And again, very simplistic. There can be a little shape for where the nose is going to be. And now the center line is going to be very far to the left. So the center line is pretty much, if you're facing, so say this little circle here is the face. The center line, if someone's facing you directly, is like this. They're front and centered. And now again, look how easy it is to just manipulate the paint here. So I'm going to push this shape of the hair a little bit further now, actually, because it is going a little bit further. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on the general shape of the head, as opposed to worrying too much or focusing too much on the features. So the center line is somewhat here. So this is our center line, very close to the edge here. Now let's just focus on this shape. So again, the hair comes a little bit further out here and makes an angle there. Very simplistic. This hair goes a little bit further down here, making an angle like that. Okay, so now I'm going to use my paper towel. So it's just a regular sheet of Viva paper towel. I like the Viva brand paper towel. It's very, very smooth. So I'm going to spin a little bit and create kind of like a stump. You see that? It's kind of like a stump. So I'm going to use this now to help me draw. So this is going to be the corner of the nose now. Something like that, just a simple shape like this. So I'm using this to subtract a little bit, corner of the eye right there. Still keeping these shapes very simple and easy to work with. And I just want to focus on the shape. Just the shape. So let's peel a little bit more out here. The chin goes down to right about there. And let's unify this little mass here. Again, it's a push and pull. I put in a little rectangle for where I wanted the axis of the eyes to go, and now I'm taking it out with this eraser. You can think of it as an eraser, kind of like a kneaded eraser with, if you're familiar with working with charcoal. The little corner here. And again, here we are in the first 10 minutes, and this is all I've established. Pretty much just the bottom of where I want the head to fit, the top of where I want the head to fit, little axis for the eyes, and that's all that I have in the first 10 minutes. Just want to get a feel for where everything is going to fit. And then here's a little shape here for the mouth. Doesn't have to be complicated, very simple. Now I'm going to switch to a size 4 filbert bristle brush, and this is going to act as a kind of like another type of stump, but a little simpler, a little more simple to handle. See that? It can make a much more crisp edge. So here we're going to reestablish that center line right about there. So it makes a shape like this. So here we have one eye socket, the other eye socket in a very simplistic fashion. So now let's look at the nose. The nose is making a little bit of an angle here. So that's all we have locked down. Just that simple, almost triangular looking shape for the nose. And here's the corner of one eye socket. And again, just trying to get this simple shape. So now this is going to cut in like this, just a little bit. The side of the forehead. And the side of the eye socket cuts in just a little bit here. Very simple. Does not have to be complicated. And now let's get a little more of an understanding of where the eyes are going to fit in relation to the nose. So first thing I did was get the idea of where I want the head to fit in a very simplistic fashion. And now I'm going to be building into that with this brush in a very subtractive fashion, meaning I'm subtracting from the paint that's already on here. And the idea, the reason why I'm doing it in this way as opposed to mixing up another puddle of paint to do this is so that you don't have to worry too much about mixing paint, so that this handles very similarly to a drawing. We really want this, we really want to think about the start of a painting, especially for all my beginners out there. We really want to think of the start of a painting as a drawing. It's kind of a mind game. I'm painting, but I'm actually drawing. So just a little shape there for the eye. So this eye gets kind of covered with the hair, so let's just go ahead and cover that. And now the shape of the forehead is actually a little bit smaller than what I have. Just going to go ahead and mask that in right there. Creating an angle here. So all this is just simple shape. Here's a corner for the chin. So let's get an idea of where the nose is going to fit, because I really want to focus on getting the eyes to fit within this large structure that I created, and then get the nose to fit relative to the eye sockets. A little angle here. This cuts in about here. Again, very simple. Keeping this as simplistic as possible. This angle is something that I really want to focus on. The angle of the nose here. So I'm going to have to make a mark like this and then stand back and see if it is reminiscent of the angle, this angle right here on the model's nose. And again, I'm not worried about anything other than just trying to get the shapes. And I should just say I'm not focused on anything other than the shapes, because let's not worry. Let's try to be calm and relaxed and just think about what kind of information we're trying to discover. So we're in the beginning of the painting, we are gathering information. Here's a little shape now for where the mouth is going to fit, and let's just go ahead and unify this whole thing as one mass. So in the beginning, it's more important to know what questions to ask instead of trying to just copy down information. Let's try to ask the right questions. And so the question here is, how does this shape of the nose relate to the surrounding shapes? So how does this shape relate to this shape, and how does this shape relate to this shape? Those are the questions we want to ask. So here's the bottom of the chin, little corner here. Again, the nose comes down to about there. And we have the simple shape for the mouth. And I like to call these simple shapes stand-ins. It's a stand-in for where I would want to place the features. So I'm not trying to say, hey, literally, here is the nose, but rather I'm putting down a place marker saying, hey, the nose could probably be there. The nose could probably be there. The mouth could probably be there. But I won't really know until I have all the information there so that I can relate everything to one another. So now the lip, the lower lip, would be coming out a little bit in that direction. So I'm subtracting a little bit here. That's all I'm doing, just trying to record and analyze the simple shapes. You can do this. Anyone that can understand the simple concept of a shape can work in this kind of way. We just have to have a little bit of patience. And just a little bit. It won't take that much. So again, the mouth might need to move up a little bit. Here's the bottom of the lower lip. Very, very simple. I'm not focused on anything other than trying to get those shapes to work. And so before long, I'm going to focus on the neck now, the shape for the neck. So we have the chin maybe coming to about there, the neck going here and making an angle down here. And then we have, of course, the shirt coming out there. Very, very simple, just abstracting the shapes. Now I have a little size 1 round brush. And so let's think about this large mass that we created as a simplified mass of, say, vine charcoal. And if you're not familiar with vine charcoal is just a very a kind of painterly medium of charcoal to use. Vine charcoal lets you make like large masses like this, and it's really messy. And so let's think of this brush now as more of like a charcoal pencil. So here's the corner of the eye. So here's going to be the part where we put our foot down in one location and then start to make more finite decisions. So I'm going to say that the eye to the left of the screen is going to be there, and then if I'm going to say that, then how far does the forehead come up here? Now just optically, the forehead may come a little bit lower. So I'm making that decision just based on relating this shape to that shape. Now I'm going to go back to my massing brush. It's kind of like a stump, really. I'm just going to add a little corner here for the side of the eye socket and an angle here for the nose. A very simple decision, a very simple line there. And this is how we're going to build the accuracy, by constructing onto these shapes. And with this brush, I would probably just clean it off by with a piece of paper towel, just like this, just pulling some of the paint out. So we have a little less paint now on this, so we can subtract a little better. So let's pull out a little bit more. And this is all shape. I'm just trying to focus on the shape. This goes a little bit further out here. And again, I think I have too much light showing here, so I'm going to unify this mass. Unify meaning just I'm going to mush the paint a little bit here. I just want to focus on this shape right there. So this shape cuts in a little bit here, goes in over there. This shape goes about here. That's all I want is to figure out where these shapes fit in relation to one another. It's the bottom of the nose. Just a little edge here. Again, trying to keep these shapes as simple and as understandable to me as possible. So the nose may need to come down a little bit. So let's push it down a little bit like that. Very simply just pushing that down. A little bit more of an angle here. And now we have the bottom of the nose probably over here. Using a vertical line, I can see that this needs to go a little bit lower. And again, I'm really not trying to add any kind of values here. So with this brush, I'm going to go ahead and kind of level this area now, just leveling it, just pushing it down like this. Very much just going to flatten that out. Nice and simple. You can do this. Simple shape. You'd be amazed at the kind of things you can construct with simple shapes. Just flattening that out. Now again, where is the nostril? Maybe it's about there. I don't know. I gotta make a mark, then stand back and see how the shapes fit in relation to one another. Top of the wing of the nose here. Again, let's try to make this as relaxing as possible. Life can get pretty stressful pretty quickly, so let's just keep these shapes simple and easy for us to understand. Just as simple as that. Just a little corner for the wing of the nose, a little dot there for the nostril, a little dot here for the lowest part of the nose, and that's it. Now for the eye over here, I'm seeing just a little glimpse of light here. So switching back to my paper towel, I'm gonna get a little edge here. And I'm seeing just a little glimpse of light here. Right about there. So I'm making a mark. Right about there. Then I'm gonna go back in with the tiny brush, and that's all I need. Just a little glimpse of light, and I might need a little bit more than that. So it's really a push and pull. The whole idea is to use the paint in this way, to learn how to manipulate the paint, make the paint work for you. You really want to own the medium. Now a little corner there, I gotta stand back to see if that fits. Kind of fits, but now we're really lacking the mouth, so let's put a little shape here. So the bottom lip I know comes out a little bit further to the left here on a vertical. It comes out just a little further out here. So I'm gonna focus on the outside shape first. So this corner comes out a little bit further here. So let's just take some more paint off of here. And let's make a little swooping motion here. Following the cheekbone, or following the cheek right here. Makes a little swooping motion. And then we have the upper lip going around here. Let's even make a little mark for where it's going to go. The corner of the mouth, say about there. Alright, so all we're doing is we made that little swooping motion. So now we're going to go cut in a little bit there for the the upper lip. Then we're going to go down here, a little shape for where the teeth would fit. And again, I'm just focusing on the outside shape, keeping this as simple and easy for me to understand. Life can get pretty stressful pretty quickly, so let's just keep this very simple and very relaxing. That's what we want. We want to enjoy the process. We don't want to stress out over any kind of little tiny bits of information that may not even be useful in the long run. Right now it's just all about these shapes. Here's just a little simple rectangular looking shape for the lip. Another little simple rectangular shape here for the bottom lip. Right about here. Let's even mask this whole thing together. Nice and simple. Just a simple shape for the lip. Now let's peel out a little bit of light here for the teeth. She's very cheerful in this image. So let's be cheerful with it too. Keeping it nice and simple. And let's just let painting be a time to relax. Especially for all my beginners out there. Don't be scared or turned away by the idea of painting a portrait. I know it sounds very difficult at first, but I assure you, just keep these shapes very simple and easy for you to understand, and I promise you, you will make tons of progress. So now with the little blending stump brush looking thing, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to soften this value a little bit. And a value, I'm going to get into that word later on. A value is just how light or how dark something is. So taking a little bit of the paint off here, I'm making this upper lip a little bit lighter. That's all I'm doing. And now again, the mouth, how far does it go? It goes a little bit further to the right. Just like that, nice and simple. And now the bottom of the mouth. So here's where the bottom of the teeth goes. Bottom of the mouth goes to about there. And I'm going to switch to another bristle brush. And I just had one on hand. This bristle brush will take a little more paint off because it's clean. So it's going to take a little more paint off. Again, very much treating this like a drawing. Let's create a nice little simple shape here for the bottom lip. Just like that. Very simple. Raising the value just by taking a little bit off. Again, just keeping the shapes as simple and easy for me to understand. And I'll tell you why that is. I keep my shapes as simple and easy for me to understand because I make mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes in painting in terms of my proportions, the placement of things. Oftentimes I'll find I need to move a mouth down or up or anything like that. So keeping the shape simple like this makes it easier to make the corrections when the time comes that you see that something needs to be changed. So that's why I usually say let's keep our shapes simple and easy to understand. The bottom of the lower lip there. And on a vertical, it should come out a little further. So with the mostly dry bristle brush, again this is a size 4 filbert brush. Gonna peel out just a little more here. Nice and simple. Now let's look at the chin in relation to all this. So the chin, let's continue. Remember that swooping motion we made here? Let's continue that all the way down here. So it goes something like this, right there, little swooping motion. So here's the chin, bottom of the chin. All it is, just pushing down a little bit on the shape. Just think of it as just a series of shapes. You can do this. So now I'm going to add a little more of a shape here for the chin. And I'm going to do that actually by flattening this out. Then I'm going to come back with the mostly clean bristle brush, and just like this, just flat shape. I'm going to follow that motion like this, just like that, like a swoosh, swooping motion. Goes a little more straight here. Nice and simple. And so the nice thing about this underpainting, so to speak, is that I'm going to come back into this with color in a day or so, and it'll be dry. And I'll be using my flat shapes of color in this kind of way to create the effect of form in a very simplistic way. And I really want you to be able to take out of this that it can be this simple, just simple shapes. So the bottom of the chin is right about here. Let's just make a mark there for where we think the bottom of the chin is going to go. And the brush that has a little more paint on it, I'm going to use it now to kind of smudge that in there, just like that. I'm intentionally making this little division for the chin a little bit darker. Nice and easy, just pushing in just like this. Super simple. Gonna unify a little bit more of this little blob of paint. I'm going to use the brush that I started with, and I'm going to add more of a shape here now for the hair. A little squiggle right here, a little squiggle right there. Very simple. Now the shape of the hair comes a little further out here, so let's put that in there. Comes a little bit further out here, a little further out there. Makes a little curve right here. So all we're doing, just recording the shapes, relating the shapes to one another. I'm going to use this to make a little more of an angle right here. So now let's think about the collar as part of the overall design of the picture. So this collar, let's make a vertical gesture right here from the corner of the mouth. So the collar kind of matches up with this. So let's subtract with the paper towel a little bit right there. So that's about where the collar is starting. And now let's look at this negative shape. I'm gonna kind of blend a little bit right here, just subtracting a little bit of the paint. Now we have an angle for the neck. So let's look at this negative shape. And now let's try to see and reason with this shape. Now I think this negative shape is a little too wide here, so that means that the shoulder might come a little bit higher up. So let's just subtract a little bit, just like that. So it's a little closer. A little closer where I think it is. And of course we're keeping our shapes simple and easy. So if anything goes wrong, if I place something down in the wrong place or anything like that, not the end of the world. Let's keep this very calm and relaxing. Here's the collar right there. Just very simply just Maybe that's 1, 2, 3 brush strokes for that collar. Let's follow through right here on this side. Very simple little angle here, angle there. That's all it is. And now I'm going to take a little more out of here. I'm going to subtract just a little more of the paint right there. So it is getting a little bit darker here. So I tell you what, I'm going to switch to my brush that has a little more of the paint. Let's take some of it off of here and maybe make some little curls at the same time. Why not? Alright, so it's a little bit darker here, so let's use the paint that was on here to add a little bit more of a darker value. Remember, a value is just a word for saying how dark or how light something is relative to something else. So this area is a little bit darker than that area. So that's all I'm doing. And I should add that light and shadow are the most important values. Two values, light and shadow. All of this is light. This little corner right there, that's our shadow. This dark value right here and the nostril. We don't want to lose that dark. So these values are the most critical values. Just two. Just two. Just as simple as that. Alright, so now let's refine the shape of the hair a little bit more, and then we'll be good to go. We'll let this sit for a day or so and then come back in once it's dry with some color, and then build a little bit more onto it. Again, I'm sorry for the noise that this makes. I know it's making a little more noise than if I were using a panel or like a wooden surface or anything like that to paint on. But I just wanted to work on a very inexpensive cotton canvas, the kind of canvas you would get if you were buying canvas in bulk from any regular kind of art store. I'm really trying to level with everyone out there, because you don't need to have very expensive materials to make a compelling image. I really want you to get that out of this. You don't need to spend lots of money on expensive linen canvases or anything like that. I know that they are nice to work on, and in fact linen is my favorite surface to work on, but for my beginners out there, or just people that are trying to get better acclimated to portrait painting, you don't need to have the most expensive materials out there to make a compelling image. You really don't. You don't have to have super expensive panels, really expensive, finely oil primed canvases or anything like that to make a compelling image. You really don't. The only thing I would say not to skimp out on is the paint. And if you want to know exactly what paint I'm using, all of that will be typed into the description below. But that is just raw umber by, I think, Plaza brand. Winsor Newton or Gamblin, any of those would be pretty good for oil paint, just regular artist grade oil paint. And it's not really that expensive. I know that a lot of you are probably buying student grade, and I'll tell you what, I used student grade for a while when I was just learning, and I did alright. Contradictory to what many people will tell you. Student grade can work, but I tell you what, just stick with the artist grade. Alright, so I'm gonna let this sit now for a day, or maybe 2 days, and then when I come back, this should be dry, and then we're going to come back in with the colors. Let's get into the color palette that I'll be using for this painting. So I'll be using lead white, raw umber, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, cadmium orange, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, Sap Green, Cobalt Teal, Ultramarine Blue, and Ivory Black. Alright, so here we are almost 24 hours later, and this little underlayer here is dry. Now remember, the objectives of the first layer were simply to try and, as accurately as possible, just using our eye for measurement, just get these simple shapes of light and dark, almost like a posterized image. Now I'm sure that you want to know about the flesh tones. How do you make naturalistic looking flesh tones with oil paint? And guess what? We're going to get to that. But right now I just want to make sure that I put my foot down on the shadow. Now the light is coming at somewhat of this angle, something like this. So this little shadow here, so this kind of lighting is called frontal lighting, where the lighting is very much frontal with the angle that you're looking at the model. And so this little shadow here is a value that I do not want to lose. And remember, a value just means how light or how dark something is. So with my size 1 round brush, I'm just going to get a mixture that is raw umber, sap green, and maybe a little bit of my ultramarine blue. Now this mixture on its own might be too dark, so I'm going to lighten it. Let's use a little bit of yellow ochre just to lighten it just a touch, maybe a little bit more. And so I do not want to lose that value. I don't want to lose this value right here, so I'm going to put my foot down on it just like that. And that is it. I don't want to lose that dark shape. Alright, so let's get into some of the flesh tones. I'm going to be using a size 4 filbert synthetic brush for this. So I'm going to be dipping my brush in my medium. Now remember that medium is 1/4 stand oil to 4/5 mineral spirits. And like I said before, you should be able to mix it quite simply, even if you just wanted to use, say, I don't know, 1 teaspoon of stand oil to 4 teaspoons of mineral spirits. That could work as well. So let's start off with some of these flesh tones over here. So very simply, let's just start off with a little bit of our cadmium orange, some alizarin crimson, a little bit of our sap green to the lead white. Now, I should say, if you don't want to use lead white, I completely understand. Now, I'm using lead white because it is a transparent white. But if you don't want to use lead white, you can certainly use something like titanium white, which is more of an opaque white. Or if you want to use another transparent white like this that isn't lead white, you could opt out for zinc white as well. So let's look at this mixture that we just made. Let's see how it fits. And that's pretty close. Let's say that's acceptable. So I'm going to use this to lay a tone on the light side of the face very, very lightly. Now I want to emphasize the importance of the simple shapes of light and shadow. And so even with color, that's going to transfer to our thought process. We really want to do the most that we can with the least amount of information. So very simply, I'm just tapping it very lightly just to get a tone. And you saw the mixture that I used, not a very complicated mixture. So let me explain why I'm going a little bit warmer than I would ultimately want to go. So I'm going to use this to help me build my flesh tones on top of. So this is kind of like, it's kind of like in the middle in terms of our value scale. Remember, value is white, middle gray, and then dark. So this is kind of somewhat in the middle so that I can have some room to move up and then some room to move down. So I'm going to switch brushes now, and I'm going to designate this, I'm going to label it as my dark brush. So I'm going to use this for the values of the hair. So I'm going to go in with our raw umber, a little bit of alizarin crimson, and let's use some cadmium orange, why not, just a little bit. Now I want to get this shape of color, and then the background, so that I can relate the flesh tones to the surrounding colors, rather than trying to mix or copy directly what I'm looking at with the flesh tones. I want to relate the colors on the flesh tone to the colors surrounding this area. If you think about it, you can't really have light without dark, can you? You can't have one color without the existence of the surrounding colors as well. And I'm not a physicist, so I'm not going to tell you why that is. I'm just going to simply tell you that I want to relate each area of color, each large area of color, to one another so that I can make a more refined judgment of what that color is going to be, rather than just trying to say this looks like maybe somewhat of a designated color. So I don't want to use a recipe, so to speak. I want to relate the colors to one another. So I'm going to go a little bit darker with this mass of the hair than need be, and I'm going to do that so that I can come back in with some lighter mixtures and kind of like in a scumbling fashion get the texture of the hair. And again, with the flesh tone brush, I'm going to put this little wash of value over here. Again, very simple. I'm going to do the same on the other side right here. You really want to work from the dark values up to the lightest values, especially if you're just getting into oil painting, or maybe this is going to lead you to your first time attempting a portrait in oil paint. I will say try to stick to just keeping your shapes very simple, just simple shapes of light and shadow, and there's so much that you can do with that. Alright, so now let's get into a little bit of the background color. And I'm going to designate this guy right here as I'm going to label this as my designated background brush. So let's use some ultramarine blue. I'm going to thin it out by dipping it into my medium a little bit. So let's start with the obvious, ultramarine blue, and of course that's going to be too saturated. So saturation is just how bright a color is. So you imagine a little bit of alizarin crimson actually to neutralize that. So if you imagine like a stoplight, like the red of a stoplight, that's much more saturated than, say, the red of an apple. So this background color, even though it may look very saturated on your screen, is not really that saturated. So something like that. And so that's an advantage in working from the live model as opposed to photo reference. Working from the live model, you have an advantage with the color. That's one of the advantages, is that you can more clearly see what a color is, whereas working from a computer screen or from a photo reference, it would distort the color. But then I will combat that by saying that if you want to create a realistic image, let's get real. So if you want to make a realistic image, and if that's your goal, to make a realistic or naturalistic looking image, then if you're going to get something a little bit different, I would say go with the color, because color is one thing that can be varied, and I'll explain what that means while I'm filling in this value. So what I mean is that if the color was not correct in terms of the hue of the color, hue being like it's either red or green or blue or something, or the saturation, like I described before. So if those aren't correct, the painting will still work, and I'll tell you why. So imagine a black and white photograph. A black and white photograph still holds its form. It still looks like a realistic image. So it still can look three-dimensional. And that is because the values are going to work. So the values are the thing that we really don't want to change too much. Now you can, and you can stylistically change it, and that's perfectly fine. But if you want to make a convincing three-dimensional, realistic, naturalistic, whatever you want to call it, looking image, the value would be the primary concern. But again, working from life, I really like working from life, but for the sake of making this video, of course, I'm pretty sure that working from the photo reference can give you the basic foundations that you would need to push further into oil painting. And again, this is the basics. I'm giving you the basics and what you would need to hit the ground running, so to speak. Alright, so now that I have that, I noticed that this little area here can get a little bit darker. So switching to my dark brush, I'm going to add another value here that's a little bit darker. And don't worry, we're going to get to the flesh tones in a little bit. I just want to have all of these colors to relate to. So something like that. Why not? Alright, so let's get into the flesh tone. So I'm going to introduce the idea of a plane. Now a plane is a three-dimensional concept, as I've mentioned before. Just a three-dimensional concept of a flat sheet in space. So this, you can think of this little surface here, this two-dimensional surface here. You can think of this as a plane existing in this space. And this plane is existing at an angle in relation to my light source. That is the light coming from my studio. So let's describe this plane here. Now, this little plane here in the corner of the cheek. So I'm going to use Alizarin Crimson and some Sap Green, two of my favorite colors to mix together. Just Sap Green. And I'm going to make a little mark here now. And again, it's all about relating these colors to one another as opposed to trying to copy them down. So that, I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to tell myself maybe that's a little bit too red. So back to the Sap Green, maybe a touch of Cobalt Teal. Just like that. And I want to make sure that the value here doesn't compete with this value here on the nose. So now this is one plane here, and then there's another plane right here on this little side of the face that's a little bit lighter. And I'll tell you why it's lighter. It's lighter because it's angled more towards the light. So I'm going to go with the cadmium orange onto the color that I already had here. And you're going to see me do this a lot. I oftentimes will build on top of existing colors. So yellow ochre, touch of raw umber to bring down the saturation. And let's see what this does. Something like that. And so I like to work from one plane and then to the corresponding plane next to it. So I work my planes side by side. So again, just two planes. One plane there, one plane here. That's all I'm doing. And so now I'm going to try and follow through on the corner of the nose here. And then I'm going to add just a little more of the orange here. Very simply. So this plane here is now curving into here. And I'll tell you why this is darker. This area is darker because the light is turning away. So the plane is turning away from the light there. And so I'm going to adjust the transition of this plane into that plane. So again, I still may have this too dark now in relation to this lighter plane here. So I'm even just using the paint that's already on the brush to adjust this value. And so let's get this light that's over here. Again, it's just about relating each shape to the corresponding shapes. Don't worry about it being a person. Don't concern yourself with, don't tell yourself that I'm painting a person, I'm painting my friend, my son, my daughter, or my chihuahua, or whatever I'm painting. Just look at it as a series of shapes, and a series of shapes in relation to one another. And how do these shapes relate to each corresponding shape? So I tell you what, this area here might be a little bit more on the, let's say, the pinkish side. So added a little more alizarin and the white. So let's get that little bit of pink that's over here now. And again, I'm just working each plane in relation to the corresponding planes. And by manipulating these shapes of color in relation to one another, I will then get closer and closer to flesh tone colors. And so let's work this little area of planes now. And so I'm going to start with this dark here in the corner of the nostril. So this value that I have here might actually work. So let's use this here. Why not? So I'm starting off with this darker halftone. And I'm going to use the same values that I used on the corner of the nose here for the shadow underneath of the wing of the nose. Just so I don't lose that dark. Just very simply like that. So I'll tell you a little trick here. So for the wing of the nose, I'm going to use this this halftone that's right here on my palette. And I'm going to flatten this out. So by flattening it out, I mean I'm just going to cover it with this tone completely. Just like that. And I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this in just a second. So I'm going to do that so that I can come back in. Notice I'm using two brushes right now. So this is like a darker halftone and this is a lighter halftone. And so I'm going to, I did that so that I can come back in with some lighter values and start to see, look how I'm just adding a little cadmium orange right here. So I did that so that I can come back in and add some lighter values. I find that it's easier to work from the darker values to the lighter values. Right there, just pushing the paint in there. And so I think there may even be a little bit of pink here, a little more pink right here. So just a touch of the alizarin should do. And again, I'm trying to use my perception of what these colors are as opposed to trying to give you a formula for what these flesh tones are. I usually don't think about it in terms of a formula. I usually think about it in terms of relating each shape to one another. So here's a little more light on the wing of the nose. Let's switch to a smaller size 1 round brush and get the highlight on the corner of the wing and the nose. So with the white and let's change the hue a little bit. Let's use some cobalt teal. Why not? Just to show you that we don't have to paint it exactly how it is in terms of the color. It's a little cobalt teal here with the white, just like that. And if you look at the value family, you can count it. The dark here, the first darks that we had, that's 1. These halftones here, remember we flattened it out with those halftones, that's 2. And then that orange that we placed there, so that's 3. And then this highlight here, that's 4. So just those 4 values should be getting the nose to look more like a nose now. And so now for this whole area of the cheekbone, I'm going to explain the surface for you. So let's make a different mixture over here, starting off with the cadmium red, and maybe let's use yellow ochre. Why not? Some yellow ochre, and then some raw umber, just a tad bit. And let's use this now. So there's a shape right here. So there's a dark shape right here. So I'll tell you what, the most important thing in terms of adding these extra shapes of value and color now is to make sure that none of these values ever get as dark as the shadow. That's the goal, is to make sure that these values don't get as dark as these. And so I'm going to use this now to, just like I did with the nose, I'm going to flatten this entire area out. So right here I'm making a shape, and this little area here is going to be my working space. So this is basically a plane. So this is one plane that I'm describing. So I'm just going to flatten this out now. And then I'm going to come back in with my lighter brush, and let's use a little more cadmium red. Cadmium red into these lighter mixtures and some of the white. You'll find that you end up using much more of the white than you do of any of the other colors. That's just kind of the way that this works. So a little more light right here. So this whole area here is a plane, so I'm going to build it from the darker planes up to the lighter planes. So I just follow my brush here, it just goes right up here. So this is going to be one plane of the cheek, just like this. Simple shape like this. And then there's going to be a lighter plane right here. So that's going to be the area that's getting hit by the light the most. So I'm using just the white on top of the, this looks like it was yellow ochre. Let's change it up a little bit. Let's go back into the cobalt teal that we had right here. So just a little bit of that here. Why not? And now with the a little more of the white, let's add a ton more actually. Let's get as close as we can to the white. And having this gray value on my palette actually also helps me judge how light or how dark something is with much more ease than if it was maybe instead of being neutral gray, the palette was just white or black or anything like that. So it kind of helps me judge the values. So let's try this value out. Very simply, just going to put that value down right there. And that's going to be a good gauge to measure the surrounding lights. So that's telling me, hey, you actually have some room now to go a little bit lighter in this area. So that's what that value is telling me, the fact that it's contrasting so much. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to lighten this area here, add a little more pink right there. Notice now how we're building the flesh tones. So it's not so much a cooking recipe for the flesh tones, it's more of a building process. And a building process in which we relate these shapes to one another. So a little bit of the sap green into this little middle tone here. Maybe we're going too saturated, so let's use some of the cobalt teal to bring down the saturation of the warm colors. Something like that. It's getting closer just a little bit. I'm going to actually soften this little darker shape here. And this whole area here is going to be it's going to be a little bit darker in relation to this area, so that's still telling me that I have more room to build here. So let's just go right into the mixture that we had. Notice I like to build my colors on top of existing puddles. I think it helps to cut down on the intensity of the color, so I don't want to have overly saturated color, so just like that. Again, it's all about just having a little bit of patience, and just a little bit of patience can go a long way with the painting. So going back in with this darker mixture. Again, there's a dark here that I don't want to lose. And now I'm going to use a little bit of the orange into this middle value here and bring some of these lights up just a little bit. Now let's get into some smaller shapes for the mouth. So let's use a smaller brush now. So I'm going to be using 3 brushes. So we have a light brush, a middle brush, and then a dark brush. So let's start with the middle brush. So I'm going to be using a combination of Alizarin crimson, a tad bit of cadmium orange, touch of yellow ochre, and a little bit of ultramarine blue, just a little bit of it. And let's get into some of the shapes for the mouth. Now with that middle tone, I'm going to just fill in this darker value here. So here's the peak of convexity of the curve, so meaning the highest point on the curve, that's all that means. And then I'm going to move all the way down here, spreading that tone down here. And then I'm going to do the same with the bottom, just spreading a tone on it, just flattening it out, just like I did with the larger areas of the flesh tones, the larger flesh tones. So now I'm going to go and label some areas as getting a little bit darker. So right here it's getting a little darker, so I'm going to use just a little bit of raw umber into my mixture, and maybe a tad bit of cobalt teal just to push the hue a little bit. So just right there. And then I'm not going to forget about this area up here. So let's work the areas around the mouth as well. So with my light brush, I'm going to clean it off a little bit with my mineral spirits. And so I'm going to use a combination of alizarin crimson, the white, cadmium orange, and a tad bit of raw umber to neutralize the saturation of the cadmiums. So again, this area is a little bit, actually it's a little bit darker than this area of the nose, so a little bit more of the mixture from the lip here should make it a little darker. So just like that, just a little bit darker. And so now the light of the teeth. So I'm going to clean off the brush by dipping it into the mineral spirits and then patting it dry on my paper towel. And so with just white and raw umber, or just white raw umber, and then just a touch of cobalt teal and a little hint of cadmium red, I'm going to paint in the light value here for the teeth. Very simple. And I'm kind of going more on the blue side with the teeth. I tend to just I err more on the blue than I do something warmer, so I like something a little cooler for the teeth. And I'm just going to add a little bit more of the cadmium yellow into it for the light right up here on the upper lip. Very simple. Just like that. And then I'm going to switch now to the middle brush, the middle tone brush, and I'm just going to use a little bit of the white cadmium orange touch of my alizarin crimson to make this area a little bit lighter now. This area is facing the light a little more. So again, this is mostly in light. The shadow is actually all the way on the corner. We can't even see that. But I left some of the tone that was on the surface to show that this is getting a little bit darker. So I'm going to switch to adding a little bit more alizarin crimson, then a touch of sap green again for the a little bit of the pink up here, the gums. I mean, very tiny, almost nothing. And now there's a little bit of light on the bottom here. So I'm going to use the cobalt teal, a little bit of cadmium yellow, and the white to add this light right here. Very simply. Now let's add some more information to the hair. So let's just take stuff that's on the palette, some of the little lighter mixtures here. And so I'll tell you what, with the hairs, with the colors of the hair, I usually kind of take from my flesh tones actually. So there's kind of a little shortcut to what I do with hair. So I'm just gonna scumble like this. And if you're having a bad day or something, take it out on the hair. Just boom, just attack it. Just take it out on the hair. So a little bit of some little scrubbing motions there. And we're going to get the effect of some of the light that's on the hair. Switching to the dark brush, I'm going to add some medium to it. Some of my Stand Oil Odorless Mineral Spirits medium. So the raw umber. And a little bit of Ultramarine Blue, tad bit of Alizarin. I like to add a little more warmth to the darks, especially around like corners like this. So let's do that. Let's go crazy. Let's just add a bunch of this mixture onto it. Why not? Just enjoy the process. Just adding this over here. Then switching to the middle brush. I will say this does do a number on your brushes. So yes, it is fun to play with these shapes like this. A lot of fun. But it just does a number on your brushes. But that's alright. It's for the sake of enjoying yourself, for the sake of having fun, and for learning. So I'm going to be introducing some little darker areas. So like some, let's consider them planes of the hair. So a little more right here. And it's actually pushing into the face a little bit here. And it's actually covering the eye a little bit more over here, covering it just a little more, switching to that half tone. So with the hair, I'm adding planes for the hair now. plane here, plane there, and a plane there, and then kind of a middle ground being the raw umber that was on there before. Switching back to the dark brush, it's much darker right here, so let's make it darker. Makes a little corner here, goes down there, something like that. And so let's just add this dark over here, just fearlessly push that in there. Switch to the brush with some of the flesh tones. There you go, very simple. Adding some planes. And this is how we're going to get the effect of hair. And the hair that is existing in three-dimensional space. So now I'm adding in a different plane. So this plane here is picking up much more light. See that? Catching more light, so it's a little bit lighter now. Very simple. Just adding a little more light. Now switching back to the dark brush. Let's get more of the shape. Let's have fun with these shapes. Something like this, something like that. A little bit of this, a little bit of that there. And there you have more of the shape for the hair. And then let's add some of the lighter areas of the hair. Let's add some light here. A little touch of light there. Yeah, why not some light here? Have fun with it. Going to use my fan brush to try and get rid of some of the glare. And I apologize for the glare. So I'm using a regular cotton canvas. And the regular cotton canvas, you can create portrait paintings on them. The cheaper canvases that you buy in bulk, such as this one. And I'm using it on purpose for the sake of showing you that you can create a portrait painting on a surface that is not so expensive and that is widely available. I will say I usually film my portrait painting videos on smoother panels, and the reason I use smoother panels is because they tend to have less of a glare. So notice how it's kind of glaring now over here. It has less glare, so if there's too much glare on this video for you, I apologize. But my other videos have more smooth panels that have much less glare. But again, this is for the sake for my beginners out there. I know a lot of you, like me, don't want to spend a lot of money on expensive materials, and people probably tell you, oh, you have to get the most expensive canvas, buy like really expensive linen and stuff like that, and then that's what will make your paintings like better, and that's not always the case. You can do things like this on canvases that are not that expensive. A little bit more of the orange from there, a little touch of light there, why not? And so let's get into this area of the face now. So back to the half tone brush, I'm going to use the colors that are already on here, and I'm going to use just a little bit of the cadmium red. Actually going to thin down the paint a little bit with my medium. So the cadmium red, the white, and I'm actually using the color that I mixed up here to help bring down the saturation of that red. A little bit more sap green to bring down the saturation even more. And let's look at this value now. It's too light, so I'm going to use some raw umber to bring down the value. Cadmium red to bring up the saturation. Now let's change the hue a little bit, so I'm going to use Cobalt Teal to make it less red. And tell you what, this is how you make your flesh tones, by relating each shape to one another. So now let's look at this shape in relation to these shapes. And the value is about right, but the hue is not. It's too cold. So let's try cadmium orange. Hopefully not changing the value too much. Okay, let's see what that does. Now, oftentimes I need to stand back to see how a shape of color like that fits in the surrounding, fits in with the surrounding colors. And so that's a little better. Let's follow through over here. And so that's our shape now, just one dark shape here. And now I'm going to use this mixture right here, and I'm going to adjust it a little bit. So I'm going to raise the value. I'm going to make it a little lighter. So using the cadmium, or sorry, using the white. Now I'm going to switch to cadmium red to bring up the hue. So more of a pinkish side right here. So standing back, that's too light. So alizarin, some sap green. See what happens. Still too light. So I'll tell you what, some more sap green, alizarin, sap green. See what happens here. That's a little closer. I just have to stand back really to see if that color is working. So this shape actually needs to move a little bit to the left. And so with the initial drawing that we did before, keeping our shapes as simple as possible. Remember I said that I kept my shapes as simple as I could, so when it comes time to move something, like this chin, moving it a little to the left, those changes are not that painful to do. So I'm actually going to use this paint that's on the brush here to flatten a little bit more out here. So remember all about those flat shapes. Just flatten it out a little bit more over here. I'm still trying to keep a distinction between this area of value and this area of value. This is still a little bit darker than this, hopefully. And then I'm going to add in that middle tone here, and just a little more sap green, raw umber, cadmium red. Maybe that's too green. Alizarin crimson. Now it's too red. Cobalt teal. And that's getting somewhere. So let's add this value now. And it's too dark. Okay, so the titanium white, cadmium yellow, titanium white, and we're just working these shapes. Like I said before, it's all about the shapes. If you can understand the triangle, if you can understand the square, if you can understand those simple shapes, then you can work your way into these more elaborate shapes, and the thought process is the exact same. Just look at that. That's even like a little, what is that? A rectangle, trapezoid looking shape. Alright, so let's actually use this color that we had before. There's a little bit of a darker value here. So let's put that in there. Just a little touch of it. Just a little bit can go a long way. And then over here, why not? There's just a little bit of a darker touch right there. Let's talk about edge quality a little bit. So with the photograph tends to sharpen edges a little bit more. And in life, we don't actually see that. We don't see so many sharp edges everywhere. So let's let the edges work for us. Let's sharpen some edges to create focal points, and then let's soften some other edges to make areas of less focus. So I'm going to put a focal point right here by sharpening this edge. Why not? I want the eye to go there first. Then the eye can go around and say, oh, look here, there's a mouth. And that kind of looks like a chin, right? So I'm gonna even sharpen this area just a little bit and then let it get softer as it goes down here. You see that a lot in a lot of old master paintings. Near the chin it's sharper, closer to the neck it's softer, and then as you approach the lips it gets sharper, like the edge here can get sharper, and then softer by the philtrum, this area here. And so after standing back I see that there may be a little more color here that I'm missing. So let's use the see some cadmium red, the white, cadmium orange, a little more orangey pink. I think this needs to be a little bit more orangey pink. Maybe not too much, but just that's enough. And the value is off, so let's adjust the value. And I noticed that by standing back, even standing back just a little bit, you'll see changes a lot more quickly that need to be made than if you're standing or sitting, say like 6 inches away. Same thing can be said for a mirror. So if you carry a mirror around you, just look at the mirror image of your painting, and usually something may look a little bit different. And if it looks different in the mirror, so if something's jumping out in the mirror, that means that on the painting itself we can adjust it. So oftentimes a mirror is kind of useful for seeing if the eyes are working in relation to one another, or if one eye may be too high in relation to the surrounding eye. So sometimes looking at the mirror image, so instead of seeing the left eye that may be a little too high up, you're now seeing the right eye that's too high up. So that change in perspective can actually help you see any kind of changes that need to be made in terms of the drawing. So just a little lighter value here. And now that I did that, after standing back, speaking of seeing changes that need to be made, what's going on there? So that is not the correct value up here. This actually needs to get a little bit darker right there. And so I'll tell you what, painting is a building process, and I'm giving you every little bit of that building process here. I'm trying to really give you the reality of what it's like, and it doesn't have to be a stressful thing. It really doesn't. Life can get really stressful if we let it, and so let's make things simple and easy for us to understand with the painting. As many people have said, this is our world, and we can describe it however we want to. If I wanted to make her hair pink, if I wanted to make her hair blue, I'll do it. I'll do what I want. But of course, I'm trying to capture the likeness of the model. That's what I want to try and capture. A little more cadmium orange there. So there's just a little less of a sharp edge here. It's a little softer. And even this, there's a lighter little area right here. Very simply just taking the paint that I already had on there. Why not just lightening this up just a little bit. So let's get into some of the smaller shapes for the eyes. I'm using my middle tone brush here. Let's just get into this. So this is my middle tone size 1 round brush. Let's get this value right here, see what happens. Put that right there. And then after standing back, I see there needs to be a little bit more of a dark right there. Switching to my darker size 1 round brush, I'm going to just use these puddles here. And very simply, I'm just going to push this dark shape right here. That's all I'm telling myself, just a darker shape. And then I tell you what, it gets a little bit lighter. A little bit lighter than this up here, so just a little lighter. Just relating the shapes to one another. And now with the dark brush, I'm going to actually I'm going to go ahead and reestablish this edge. So it goes out, turns in right about here. So whenever I try to work the outside shape of something, I kind of tend to close one eye. So I'm closing one eye right now to make these changes. And again, I'm trying to relate the shapes to the surrounding shapes, knowing very well that I may never get it as accurate as the photograph. That's alright. I mean, you'll often see my paintings, like the images that are displayed in the beginning of what the painting is going to look like in my videos. They're usually not perfect renditions or perfect photographic renditions of what I'm looking at, and that's just because I'm trying to be honest to myself and just use observation to guide my brush and a little bit of knowledge. Never trying to perfectly copy. So just a little bit darker here. Switching to this darker brush. I'm going to use this value here and knock it down just a little bit with this puddle. Very simply, just like that. And now there's a touch of light over here. Very slight touch of light here for the light of the eye. For the white of the eye, known as the sclera. So for the white of the eye, the sclera, I use the white raw umber and a little glimpse of the flesh tone. Let's take some flesh tone like this. Just a tiny bit. Don't want to make it too warm. Squint my eyes and I see a little bit of light here. Just a little bit. And then of course you cannot have light without dark. So I'm going to go and add a little bit of the dark that I see here. Just like that, very simple. And I used the mixture that was already on my dark brush, if you didn't notice. Not trying to complicate things. And it's not straight black either, I should say that. I usually don't use straight black or straight white. So something like that. And it's going to get a little bit darker near the bottom here. So let's use some of these mixtures here. Why not? Just a little bit darker here. And look how you can build on these simple shapes. It's a lot of fun to see the painting develop from such a simple abstract notion to something more realistic. So just a little darker here. And there's actually more hair coming out here. So I'm going to switch to this brush here with the dark. Add some alizarin. Raw umber, why not? Let's take some of the paint that's already on here. And now a little bit of the hair going in right here over the eye. Just a little bit of hair over here. Very subtle. And there's even more actual hair over here. Let's make that little shape that it's creating. And then let's add some more of the dark. So alizarin, my first time using the ivory black. The ivory black. I tend not to use the ivory black. Oftentimes I will use something like ultramarine blue with raw umber to create a dark value. But I will use ivory black sometimes to take down the saturation of something. So notice I used it to take down some of the saturation. So it makes the color darker, obviously. Ivory black makes it darker, but it's a very nice neutralizer. So it kills off the saturation. So I used it to kill off some of the saturation that I had in the mixtures right here. A little bit darker here, and if you notice I am pushing some of the warmth a little bit as well, but I didn't want it to be too warm. More ivory black right here. Let's push some of this value right here. And I'll say this is my darkest area of the panel, or sorry, of the canvas. So it's important to have these large shapes of value work in relation to one another so that you can have a floor. So this is the floor, the darkest dark that I will go. Notice it's still not straight black. And a ceiling, the lightest value can go. So you want to have the floor and the ceiling to create the volume. And I'm just going to scratch that in there, why not? Have fun with it. Now let's add a little more information into the eye, this eye right here. So I'm going to place a little dark shape here for the upper eyelid. And so it's the pretty much just raw umber with a tad bit of ultramarine blue and maybe a hint of alizarin crimson. And I'm going to add another value just right here. So this is pretty much the flesh tone mixtures that I already had on the palette. Just a little bit lighter there. And now there's going to be a lighter value. So the light of the eye is going to be just a little bit lighter. Just a touch. And now there's going to be a little bit more of a darker accent right beneath the lower eyelid. Very simple. Just like that, very simple. And after making a series of marks like that, it's important to stand back as often as possible. And standing back helps you see what the painting actually looks like, as opposed to being up front and center. So after standing back, I see that this shape might need to come down just a little bit. Just a little bit there. And it may need to come further out up here. Very simple. I'm telling you, it's very simple. Just a simple series of shapes. And now for the light, there's a little bit more of the light right here. And so this light I'm actually going to use pretty much just white and cadmium orange and maybe a touch of cadmium yellow. And I'm going to use my light brush, my light size 1 round brush. Just a little touch right there. Doesn't take much. So let's paint a little bit of the collar. So I'm going to use ultramarine blue into these mixtures of paint here. And again, I like to mix on top of my previous puddles, a little bit of cobalt teal. So I like to mix on top of my previous puddles just to neutralize the saturation of the colors that I'm using. A little bit of alizarin crimson. Back to the cobalt teal. I'm going to try to get like a nice, almost a muted purple-like color. And let's go crazy with it. Let's get a little bit of cadmium orange, see what happens. Alright, so let's do something with the collar. So I'm going to add in first a shadow shape. A little more of a triangle like this. Maybe it curves down a little bit like that. Very simple, just like that. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but I'm going to change the value of this by adding just a little bit of yellow ochre just to lighten it up. So now it's almost a little more on the greenish side. So now this shadow goes down like this, makes a slight angle like that, very simply. Then let's follow through up there. So now with the light on the shirt, I'm going to use a different brush. I'm going to put a little bit of my medium into it, my Stand Oil Mineral Spirits medium. So I'm going to go and dip into my white. It's alright if it has some of the some residue of other paint mixtures in there. I am not a perfectionist. And let's take some of this background color and maybe a tad bit of yellow ochre. So the photo reference might be blasting the light on the shirt, so this might look straight white on the screen, but I assure you, a white like this in kind of a warm light, so the warm light would influence this, so it'd be safer to go with maybe like more cadmium orange type mixture. I'm not saying to make it bright yellow or bright orange or anything, but just tinting the color a little bit. And of course the value, I don't want it to be straight white either. So something like this, let's see how that works. Just going to put a little shape right here and then stand back. It might be glaring too much, so let's try that again. And that is closer to what I want, but it might be too light. So I'm going to use a little bit of the Ultramarine, tad bit of raw umber, and just a little bit of that. So then I'm going to use this now to add a shape over here. Then I'm going to use a little bit of, let's take something off of here, why not? Put that little mark there. Going to switch to my middle tone brush that I used for this and add a little dark shape right here. Following through down here. And let's make it warmer. A little bit more alizarin into these mixtures. Very simple, just like that. And now I'm going to add the same color that I took off of there. I'm going to put into this little puddle here, and with a little more of the white and a tad bit of, let's use some sap green, bring down the warmth. So now let's just put that in here. And again, I'm not trying to make a perfect photographic rendition of what I'm looking at. I'm just trying to relate each shape to one another. And in this case, I am going to abbreviate a little bit, so I'm not going to try and finish any of these areas or even render them to the degree or express them to the degree that I did with the values and colors on the face. So just a little bit lighter there. Oftentimes a single brush stroke like that can do a lot of magical things. It's a little bit more light here. I'm going to utilize the tone that's already on the canvas to help me get some more of kind of the effect of the collar. A little bit more light here. And by getting the effect of the collar, I mean I'm just leaving some over here to give me kind of like a little, just like a tiny little detail. Light there. A little bit of light here. Something like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and spread that tone down here. And I don't want to do too much with the shirt, so I'm not going to try to put any more information that I need to have it read as a collar. So a little more of the white. And let's cool it down a little bit. So the cobalt teal. So a little bit of cobalt teal. Just a little bit. Alright, so let's just put that in there. stand back. And it's good. I don't want to put too much more into that, so let's just leave that there. Now I'm going to revisit the hair. So let's throw in some more of the darks that exist here. So Ivory Black, Alizarin. See what happens. Let's get some more of the texture of the hair. Just let the brush run free. Just let the brush run free. And when I apply the paint kind of vigorously like this, it does kind of shake the surface that I'm working on, so I'm trying not to have it shake too much. A little bit more of that dark up here that we were trying to get. Dark over here. Switching brushes now. Let's get some of these lights. Use some of the background color. Now let's get some little touches of light. Like that. Very subtle. Little glimpses of light. And let's not try to group them all together. Let's try to put some light over here. Maybe 2 marks over here. 5 marks over here. Something like that. Maybe just a single little mark over here. So that all of the lights aren't just kind of gathered into one area. Let's put maybe 3 over here. And then let's put maybe, I don't know, like another 3 over here. So 1, 2, 3 over there. Stand back. It's looking a little better. And again, I'm not really trying to copy exactly what I'm looking at, but rather trying to relate each of the shapes to one another. I'm going to switch to my dark brush again. Add some more dark value over here. Let's add some little spins here. Spinning the brush. Why not? And then over here, I'm going to spin the brush a little bit, just like that. Not an exacting science, just messing around with the paint here. And then let's get some more of this light, and maybe just a couple touches of light here. So 1 here, a little bit of light there. And after applying the paint, I really have to stand back and see how it fits with the rest. It's important to always stand back, especially at a crucial moment like this. And I'm going to use this actually to soften the edge a little bit over here. I don't want this edge to be so sharp. I want this sharp, and I want this less sharp, and I want this to be a little bit sharper. A little bit more sharp over here. A little touch of light over here, not too much. Go back to these warmer colors right there. Let's play around with that. Then maybe just like 2 marks here. Like 1, 2. There you go. Now switching back to the background brush. I'm going to go back to the Ultramarine Blue, Raw Umber, Cobalt Teal. I'm going to thin out the paint just a little bit with my medium. Using a little white. And let's use some Ivory Black just to bring down the intensity of these colors. So something like that. Maybe a little more ultramarine. A little more ultramarine. Let's try to shape the hair a little better. The Ivory Black again. So the shape of the hair comes down just a little bit here. And in the beginning I wanted this to trail off to the edge, so I'm going to do that. Just let some of this trail off here. So that's good. It's a little more refinement to that shape there. Let's see if I can get some of a little texture to the background here, just by kind of scrubbing on the edges here. It's a nice little effect. I'm going to add just a few little glimpses of the texture of the collar. So there's like a little kind of a triangle here, and I'm gonna try and use the layer of paint that I applied over here, just so I don't make this too dark. And a little bit of texture over here, a little bit of texture over here, kind of almost like a stripe of some sort. And I'm not really trying to literally put down the design that I'm looking at, but just kind of putting in just little bits of information for this little bit of detail in the collar. So I'm going to use some of these flesh tone colors, maybe with a little bit of orange, to get this little design here. Goes down like this, makes a little triangle, something like that. Don't need to put too much down. Maybe a little bit over here, over there. The shape goes somewhat like that. Just little glimpses of information there. And tell you what, I'm going to show you something that I do. So I don't want this to have too much emphasis. So I don't want the eye to go collar when you look at the painting. I want it to be like, oh, okay, portrait. Oh, look, there's hair, background color, then the collar. So I'm going to soften the edges around it with my fan brush. It's very lightly tapping onto it, just to soften the edge. And of course I use this to eliminate glare. I use this to eliminate glare too, but it also softens over here like this. It also softens some of the edges, just so that it's not as distracting over here. And that just about wraps up this week's portrait painting demonstration. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it helps you out. And always remember, with each and every painting that you create, you inevitably will be learning something new. And I hope this painting was a good demonstration of how we can keep things simple yet accurate in such a way that we can, in a relaxing manner, create our very own portrait paintings. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week.